Hello and welcome back to this section. In this section, we are going to review Service Bus. Now, Service Bus is one of the messaging offerings in Azure. Okay, so before we learn about Service Bus, let's see what is messaging. Just in case if you are not aware of the messaging concept in the integration space, let's quickly review that. I bet most of you already know, but let's still review it for the sake of someone who is not coming from the integration background, right? So messaging is used in the enterprise integration space very heavily, so not every integration is synchronous integration, right? So if you're calling an API to connect to another system, that's a synchronous integration. So you call their API, their web service, send the data, they send you the response back, that's over. So that's called synchronous integration. But most of the other integrations on the enterprise integration space is async integration. What does it mean by async, right? So a system that's sending the data, right, would send a piece of data in a particular agreed upon format. It could be a JSON format, or it could be an XML format, it could be a text file, CSV file, right? And that file is is generated from the source system, and then source system would forget about it, right, and would put that file somewhere. It could be a file location on a network share, or it could be a queue. So if you're coming from the integration background, you would have heard or you may have used queues, multiple queues, right? For example, Microsoft offers MSMQ, and then there is a queuing platform from IBM, right? So on. So the source system would write the message in the queue, and the destination system would read the message from that queue whenever it's ready to read that message, right? So this is the async connection between these two systems, right? So for this type of integrations, you need a mechanism in between these two systems which can hold the message for that moment, temporary storage of that message, right? So that is what Service Bus is all about, and that is what's called messaging in the integration space, right? So before we learn about Service Bus and the queues and topics and other offerings within Service Bus, let's quickly review, what are the other ways of using messaging, and what does Azure offer, and what are the distinctions between them, right? So here you can see on my screen, there are two types of messaging platforms available on Azure, right? The first one being events, and second one being messages. Now there is a very, very distinct difference between these two, right? So let's understand what is events and what is messagings, right? So events are basically very lightweight notification. It might contain some context of the data, but not the actual data, right? So that's why it's very light in its size, right? So the source system might just send, let's say, a user ID or an item number, for example, if it was an e-commerce or something else, right? So for example, work ID or employee ID, or some kind of context of the data, but not an actual data. And then the integration would use that notification to carry forward the integration, right? We'll build such integrations in the later chapters, but for the sake of understanding, the events are very lightweight notifications, right, compared to messages, which are larger in size, right? So messages are actually, they contain the actual data that is supposed to be transferred from one system to another system. It could be in any other format, JSON or XML, right? But messages are the actual data itself. So that's why they are usually larger in size, right? And for the events, Azure has multiple offerings. It has something called event hubs, right? You can use event hubs, or there's something called event grid. You can use either of them, but the usage is usually decided upon, how many events are you planning to generate. Both of them are similar in a way, in the functionality point of view, but event grid can handle millions of events, whereas event hubs, can handle hundreds of thousands of events at a time. So based on the load that you're expecting for your eventing platform, you can choose which one to use. And for the messages, there is something called service bus that's offered in Azure. And in service bus, there are queues and topics and subscription. We'll review them in the upcoming videos, right? And this particular section, we are going to focus more on the service bus offerings, right? So let's see what service bus offers and why it's so important for the enterprise integration space. So first of all, service bus offers queues. Okay, again, the name says queues. It's very much similar to what you would use MSMQ for or IBM queues for, right? So as the name suggests, they are queues, and queues are basically temporary storage for the messages while it's being transmitted. So if a message is transmitted from system A would write that message in that queue, and then there would be a system B listening at the other end of that queue. Let's see how it would look like. So here you can see in this picture, sender is system A, and sender is sending messages to this queue. Now in the queue, you can see there are already multiple messages already in there. And on the other side of the queue, you have your receiver, right? So sender might be generating, let's say, 100 messages per minute, but the receiver might need more time to process all of these messages. It cannot probably process 100 messages per minute. So in the meantime, all of those messages would be stored in this queue. So queue is a temporary storage location for all of your messages, right? And each message is usually received by only one receiver. So there are other ways and means to achieve multiple receivers in the queues as well. But typically and most usually, right, there is only one receiver for messages in one queue. And as we just said, right, what the queue does is, it decouples the sending system to the receiving system. So they don't have to know the state of each other. The sending system can keep on sending hundreds of messages per minute, and the receiving system can continue to ingest maybe 10 or 15 messages per minute. But the rest of the messages are not being lost, they are being temporarily held in the queue, right? So queues are very important in service bus, and we'll make use of them in the exercises that we'll do in the upcoming videos, right? And the second thing is topics, right? So let's see what are topics. So service bus queues and then service bus topics. So topics are very much similar to queue, except that one distinct difference is that one sender can send a message to a topic, and then there can be a multiple receivers to the same message, right? So let's say if you're sending an order detail to a topic, now if that order is required, some of the data is required from that order to multiple systems. For example, your database also needs, your CRM also needs, your finance also needs, right? So all three of these systems or multiple systems can subscribe to the same message from that topic. So this is the main difference, right? In the queue, there is one subscriber and one publisher. In the topics, there can be one publisher, but you can have multiple subscribers to that topic, right? So this is the key difference. And so if you use a topic if you want each message to be delivered to more than one destination. So I hope this is clear for you, right? Service bus is the main component that we are looking at in this section. We're not going to look into as much of a detail as service bus for event hubs or event grids, right? We're not going to focus on those two entities in this course. But service bus and service bus queues and topics are very important components and will make a lot of use while building the sample integrations going forward. I hope you're following it and I hope you're enjoying the course so far. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions, right, we'll review them in the Slack channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.